Oh, unfortunately, I'm going to have to ask you to go to the next slide and things like that, right, Jonathan? But that's okay. So I'll give you another 10 seconds to do that. And while you're doing that, I'm going to, I see there's some children here, so I'll tell a story of a time that was really interesting for me. Now, I used to work for Australian Customs, and back in Brisbane, there were two airports. We had Brisbane Airport, and we had the Gold Coast Airport. And the Gold Coast Airport was probably about a 2.5-hour drive, if I remember correctly. I can't remember, but it was a bit of a drive. And every day, the Gold Coast Airport would ask for about 3 or 4 officers from Brisbane Airport to come and help them out. It was a great gig. If you got chosen to be one of the 4 or the 3 or 4 to go on that particular day, it basically took 5 to 6 hours out of your day. So on a 10-hour shift, it was nice to get 6 hours taken out of your day. And we went to Gold Coast to do one flight. Just one flight came in, we processed one flight, and then we went back to Brisbane Airport. That's how it worked, right? And so it was always good too, because by the time we got back to Brisbane Airport, there was only one flight left to process, because all the flights had come through in the morning. So it was a great gig. But it was pretty bad when the storms came. Anyone been in a tropical storm in Queensland? Yeah, it's pretty full on. It's pretty full on. And I remember jumping in the car, and and I never volunteered to put my hand up. They would say, "David, do you want to drive?" I said, "No, but I will." And there was another guy named Shun, and I loved Shun saying his name. It's such a cool name, Shun. He was a small Chinese man, about this small. He's a small frame as well. And this particular day when it was raining, he said, "I'll drive." And so he drove towards the airport, and the rains got harder. And so we pulled over. And so we thought, we'll wait for a while, see if the rain subside. And it kind of did. So we went back on the highway again, and we were back on the roads, and it started raining hard again. This time, we couldn't pull over in the middle of the highway. We couldn't pull over anywhere. And we hit a puddle. And, I couldn't see from here to where Peter and Merrill were. I couldn't see anything. I was like, man, how's Shun seeing this? And then we hit a puddle, and the car just started spinning around. And I was in the passenger seat, and there were 2 other officers, and I'm going to mention they were female because they were screaming really loud. All right. And as they're screaming, and I'm just grabbing onto anything I could, I remember distinctly looking at Shun, and Shun was like this at the steering wheel. And in the midst of that, I thought, I had the ability to think, why isn't he freaking out? Why is this not affecting him? And so I kept that in the back of my mind, right? We went to the airport, I drove back, and the storm was okay. And probably, it must have been a couple of months later, we were having lunch, and Shun was sitting across from me, and he was a really humble guy. And I said to him, and he was quite new to customs at that time. He'd just finished a 6-month course, and he'd come to Gold Coast for like the 2nd or 3rd time. And at lunchtime, I said to him, "Hey, Shun." He's like, "Yeah, do you remember that time we drove to Gold Coast? And there was that storm, and the car went spinning because we hit a puddle." And he goes, "Oh, yes, I remember that." I said, "I noticed you're the only one in the car that wasn't scared." And he said, "Oh, yeah." I said, "How come? Why weren't you scared? Like the car was out of control, and you're staying calm trying to steady the car." And he said, "Oh, David," he goes, "I used to drive cruise ships." He was a captain of cruise ships. And he said, many times, you couldn't see 5 meters in front of you. I said, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, on the seas, you don't see any of that stuff." So I've been in that situation many times. I said, "Oh." I said, "So what do you do?" He goes, you just rely on the instruments." I went, "Oh, okay." And so I paused for a minute and I thought, what instruments? In the car? So I said to him, "There were no instruments." I said, "There were no instruments in the car." And he says, "Oh, that time I was just relying on instinct." But because of his profession, because he's a professional, because he's been doing that for years, he was driving ships, I suppose a little car didn't really affect him that much. But he's been the captain of cruise ships. You know, and what I want to talk about this morning is being able to, the God that we serve has a vision. He's able to see way in the future. And sometimes we're focused on things that's only within our vision scope. And this morning, I want you to think about, if I was to ask you, what is your personal mission? What is your personal mandate that Jesus Christ has put in your life? What would it be? Write it down. Second question is, what about your